The arrest itself was quiet, almost procedural. They cataloged every visible weapon with clinical precision, sealed each item in containment fields, and recorded the human male as compliant but potentially unstable. To the council authorities, the operation was straightforward. Remove the tools, neutralize the threat, maintain order. What they failed to consider was a possibility their doctrine did not account for. Some species do not rely on weapons to be dangerous. Marcus Hawley did not resist when they searched him. He allowed the scanners to pass across his body, permitted the restraints, and even thanked the officers for handling his belongings carefully. The response confused them more than defiance would have. Most detainees displayed fear, anger, or negotiation. The human displayed patience. It was not submission. It was control. The detention facility processed thousands of high-risk prisoners across multiple sectors, yet Marcus altered its rhythm within a single cycle. Surveillance logs noted abnormal calmness. Heart rate remained steady under confinement. Stress indicators never reached expected thresholds. When placed in a holding unit with reinforced barriers, he examined the environment with the interest of a technician evaluating unfamiliar equipment rather than a prisoner assessing limits. Initial assessment classified him as moderate threat with restricted access privileges. That classification lasted precisely 4 hours. The first conflict occurred when a Thoran detainee attempted intimidation. The alien species relied heavily on physical dominance displays. Size, volume, proximity. Marcus responded without aggression. He adjusted his stance, shifted weight, and deflected the incoming strike with efficient precision. The movement required minimal force, yet achieved total control. The Thoran collapsed, restrained by leverage rather than impact. Security teams intervened immediately. Marcus complied with all commands. He released the opponent, stepped back, and awaited instruction. Medical scans later confirmed no permanent damage to the Thoran detainee. The report listed the event as controlled defensive action. That wording did little to ease concern. Visible effort. Interrogation followed. Standard procedure demanded clarification of training background. Marcus explained in simple terms. Human education prioritized adaptation, physical conditioning, situational awareness, and controlled response formed part of normal development. He described these abilities not as combat specialization, but as basic preparation for unpredictable environments. The statement unsettled the evaluators. If this was baseline capability, specialized individuals would represent an entirely different category of risk. Further observation revealed consistent behavioral patterns. He conserved movement. He studied routines. He engaged respectfully with staff and inmates alike. Yet beneath that cooperation existed unmistakable readiness. It resembled a dormant system awaiting activation rather than a suppressed impulse. The distinction mattered. One implied potential instability. The other implied deliberate restraint. The facility director ordered upgraded containment measures, not because Marcus had escalated, but because he had not. A threat that required no display to assert control demanded re-evaluation. Weapons had been removed successfully. The subject, however, remained unchanged. The assumption that danger resided in equipment began to erode. By the end of the first cycle, a new internal note appeared in the classification record. It did not describe aggression or resistance. It recorded a realization. The human male demonstrated capability independent of external tools. The designation was updated quietly, without public acknowledgement. The language was cautious, but unmistakable. Subject does not require weapons to present risk. And for the first time since intake, the facility understood that confiscation had solved nothing. Enhanced containment did not change Marcus Hale's behavior. The restraints were stronger. the surveillance denser, and the response teams closer to his unit. He acknowledged every adjustment with polite attention, as if the facility were conducting an experiment and he had agreed to participate. What unsettled the staff was not resistance, but the absence of strain. Pressure that forced other detainees into agitation left him unchanged. He adapted to the new limits with quiet efficiency, mapping schedules and responses without appearing to try. The council analysts requested a deeper evaluation of human physiology. Medical scans were authorized under observation protocols. Results: complicated existing models. Muscular output exceeded baseline expectations, even in a resting state. Neural response times indicated rapid decision processing under simulated threat conditions. Pain tolerance thresholds remained unusually high, yet the subject showed no sign of emotional detachment. He was not numb. He was disciplined. The difference challenged standard classification methods that equated restraint with suppression. Interaction patterns provided additional data. When assigned routine tasks within the unit, Marcus completed them with careful precision. He repaired minor structural faults in his enclosure using permitted tools, then reported the improvements without claiming credit. He assisted other detainees with translation and de-escalation during disputes, often preventing incidents before security intervention became necessary. Compliance did not diminish influence. Without authority, he shaped outcomes through presence alone. Personnel began noting that disturbances decreased in zones adjacent to his placement. Concern escalated when simulation drills were conducted nearby. Emergency protocols required rapid containment under hypothetical breach conditions. Most detainees reacted with confusion or fear during alarm sequences. Marcus responded with structured awareness. He oriented himself toward exits, evaluated response timing, and positioned his body to protect vulnerable individuals within reach. He acted without instruction, not as a challenger, but as a stabilizing element. Security review boards struggled to categorize behavior that increased safety while demonstrating capacity for controlled force. Interrogation resumed under revised parameters. Officials avoided direct confrontation and instead pursued understanding of human training doctrine. Marcus described a philosophy centered on responsibility rather than dominance. Humans, he explained, developed capability because environments were uncertain and survival demanded preparation. Tools extended ability, but did not define it. Remove equipment and the core remained. Preparation lived in reflex, judgment, and choice. The simplicity of the explanation made it difficult to dismiss. It framed danger not as aggression, but as readiness applied with intention. A secondary incident confirmed the concern. During transport between evaluation chambers, a malfunction caused a temporary failure in magnetic restraints. Standard procedure predicted immediate attempt at escape. Marcus did not run. He secured the transport unit's failing panel to prevent decompression and guided nearby staff to stable positions until systems recovered. Surveillance recorded efficient motion, calculated force, and precise control. The event concluded without injury. The official report praised cooperation. The private annotation was less reassuring. Subject maintained full operational capability without reliance on equipment. Internal discussion shifted tone. The original premise had been simple. Confiscate weapons, remove threat vectors, maintain order. Evidence now indicated that confiscation addressed only surface variables. Capability resided in training, cognition, and controlled response. The human did not escalate under pressure, yet each observation reinforced the same conclusion. Constraint had revealed function rather than limitation. By the close of the second cycle, classification boards convened to reassess containment philosophy. The question was no longer whether Marcus Hawley posed a risk. The question was how to define a risk that expressed itself through restraint. Documentation language grew increasingly precise, attempting to capture a phenomenon outside established doctrine. The update entered the record with measured formality. Subject demonstrates autonomous defensive capacity, independent of external armament. Behavioral profile indicates controlled application rather than reactive force. Within the facility, routines continued. Guards rotated. Systems monitored. Procedures remained intact, yet a subtle change had taken hold. They had removed every weapon they could find. The realization spreading through the command structure was far more difficult to contain. The reassessment of Marcus Holly did not remain confined to internal reports. Command divisions began adjusting procedures around him without formally announcing the shift. Guard rotations increased, not because he had attempted escape, but because his presence demanded constant awareness. Supervisors instructed personnel to treat interactions with measured neutrality. No provocation, no unnecessary force, no casual familiarity. The guidance revealed an unspoken admission. They were no longer managing a prisoner. They were managing uncertainty. Behavioral specialists attempted structured dialogue sessions designed to evaluate human strategic thinking. Marcus participated without resistance. He answered direct questions with calm clarity and declined speculative traps with polite silence. When presented with hypothetical combat scenarios, he did not describe violence with enthusiasm. Instead, he outlined prevention, methods, containment priorities, and risk minimization. The analysts expected tactical aggression. What they documented instead was disciplined restraint paired with decisive capability. He spoke as if force were a tool of last resort, not a defining trait. A controlled stress evaluation was authorized under strict observation. Environmental pressure variables were increased gradually. Lighting disruptions, sound distortions, and time compression simulations were applied to measure cognitive degradation. The objective was to observe the threshold at which human performance fractured. Marcus's responses remained stable. His breathing slowed, not accelerated. His posture adjusted subtly to conserve energy. He tracked changes in pattern and responded with economical movement. The data indicated not immunity to stress, but mastery of it. Pressure refined his focus rather than weakening it. Security personnel found his physical efficiency equally unsettling. He did not display strength recklessly. Every movement appeared deliberate, calibrated to achieve function without waste. During a controlled equipment handling assessment, Marcus manipulated tools with precision exceeding trained technicians. Grip force varied exactly as required. Motion pathways minimized the strain. It became evident that human training did not merely build power. It engineered control. The implication unsettled containment planners who had relied on brute restraint as their primary doctrine. A minor facility emergency provided further evidence. A structural vibration disrupted a maintenance corridor near his sector. Systems faltered momentarily, and automated barriers failed to deploy. Standard protocol predicted opportunistic behavior from detainees. Marcus instead secured unstable components and directed nearby personnel away from hazard zones. He neither exploited the failure nor ignored it. He responded as though stability itself were a responsibility. Surveillance review noted the same. Pattern emerging repeatedly. Capability existed, but it expressed itself through decision, not impulse. Council observers struggled to reconcile the contradiction. Confiscation had removed all physical weapons. Yet every test demonstrated that the human required none to remain formidable. His strength was integrated with cognition, and cognition was guided by principle. The framework defined existing classifications that separated threat from discipline. Here, both coexisted seamlessly. He was not dangerous because he was uncontrolled. He was dangerous because he was controlled. Interrogation teams shifted strategy once more. Rather than challenge him directly, they requested explanation of human doctrine regarding self-definition. Marcus answered with measured simplicity. Humans, he explained, were shaped by environments where survival depended on adaptation. Tools extended ability, but identity came from preparation. Remove equipment, remove advantage, remove support structures. What remained was training embedded in thought and action. Capability did not disappear when stripped. It revealed itself. Documentation from the third evaluation cycle concluded with a statement that circulated quietly through command channels. The human subject demonstrates persistent operational potential independent of material support systems. Risk profile cannot be reduced through confiscation measures alone. Containment remained intact. Protocols remained active. Yet perception within the facility had changed irreversibly. They had taken his weapons and expected reduction. What they observed instead was concentration. The facility's leadership convened a closed assessment after reviewing the third cycle data. The question was how to define a threat that did not rely on weapons, numbers, or environment. Traditional metrics failed repeatedly. He adapted faster than protocols could predict. Each restriction clarified his effectiveness instead of limiting it. The conclusion was uncomfortable but unavoidable. Containment had removed his tools, not his capability. They introduced layered constraint testing to evaluate cumulative limitation. Mobility range was reduced, sensory input filtered, and response windows artificially shortened. The intention was to fragment attention and degrade coordination. Marcus adjusted with quiet precision. He moved less but perceived more. He spoke less but communicated more clearly. He conserved energy and redirected focus toward pattern recognition. Observers noted that limitation did not compress his performance. It refined it. Security doctrine emphasized dominance through overwhelming presence. 5 guards were assigned to maintain visual proximity during movement authorization. The formation was designed to project control. Marcus acknowledged them without resistance. His compliance, however, altered the dynamic. The guards did not escort a subdued detainee. They maintained formation around a stable center of gravity. The distinction was subtle, but visible in posture recordings. Authority projected outward. From procedure, control radiated outward from him. That an incident in the analysis chamber forced a rapid response evaluation. A diagnostic unit malfunctioned, releasing a cascade of electrical discharge across a peripheral console array. Personnel hesitated, uncertain whether to prioritize containment or system preservation. Marcus acted within permitted boundaries. He redirected a destabilized panel using minimal force and isolated the hazard zone. He operated inside constraint with decisive clarity. Review boards categorized the event as unauthorized. Assistance that did not breach protocol. The classification itself reflected institutional confusion. Psychological teams attempted a final reframing approach. They proposed that human effectiveness emerged from external conflict conditioning. Remove conflict, remove motivation. Marcus listened, then responded with controlled directness. He explained that training prepared humans for conflict but did not require it. Preparation existed independent of circumstance. Capability persisted without hostility. Force was an option, not an identity. The statement introduced a destabilizing premise for the Council. A being that did not need conflict could not be pacified by its absence. Containment architecture underwent silent revision, not to increase restraint, but to increase observation fidelity. The facility no longer attempted to compress the human profile into known threat categories. Instead, they documented behavior as a distinct operational model. Marcus Hawley represented a principle rather than an exception. Remove the weapon. The human remains. remove advantage. The human adapts, remove expectation. The human defines the outcome. The fourth evaluation summary concluded with a line circulated only among senior command. Confiscation reduces tools. It does not reduce a human. The implications settled heavily across the council network. They had believed they were studying a detainee. In truth, they were witnessing a demonstration. Administrative pressure intensified after the fourth evaluation summary circulated through council command. Oversight authorities demanded justification for continued maximum security. Facility leadership responded with data, not speculation. Metrics showed consistent operational capacity under constraint, strategic awareness without agitation, and cooperative compliance paired with autonomous judgment. A procedural review introduced controlled negotiation trials to evaluate decision thresholds. Marcus processed each scenario with measured patience. He clarified priorities, requested definition of lawful scope, and proposed outcomes that minimized harm while preserving structure. He required coherence from it. When coherence existed, he aligned with it fully. When it fractured, he stabilized it. Their communication became more precise, their movements more deliberate, their assumptions fewer. It emerged through exposure. Observers concluded that the human's influence functioned less like intimidation and more like calibration. Standards rose because inconsistency was no longer tolerable near him. Protocol dictated immediate immobilization measures. Marcus remained stationary without instruction, maintaining posture alignment until system recovery completed. He did not exploit the delay, yet his stillness revealed awareness of it. Post-incident analysis confirmed he had detected the malfunction before monitoring software registered the fault. Council legal representatives requested a direct clarification of intent. Marcus answered without rhetorical flourish. He stated that his objective within confinement was preservation of dignity, adherence to regulation, and prevention of avoidable harm. He did not seek dominance. He sought equilibrium. Schema, rather than scale threat by weapon possession. They recommended assessing entities by intrinsic adaptability. Marcus Halley exemplified the principle. Adaptability was not a response. It was a constant condition. Systems designed to control environment could not fully control a subject whose defining trait was adjustment. Internal communications began referring to him not as a detainee profile, but as a reference standard. Training simulations incorporated anonymized behavior sets derived from his evaluations. The intention was preparedness. The facility had ceased asking how to neutralize a human without weapons. It had begun asking. The fifth cycle report closed with a concise directive distributed to supervisory ranks. Maintain regulation. Maintain respect. Assume capability persists regardless of confiscation. Containment remained intact. Understanding continued to evolve. Reports showed no escalation, no resistance, no deviation from expected behavior. Yet the facility did not relax. Experience had replaced assumption. Was not interpreted as passivity. It was interpreted as balance maintained by awareness on both sides. Guards followed protocol with unusual precision. Supervisors reviewed directives before issuing them. Systems functioned as designed, and for the first time that outcome felt intentional rather than routine. A cross-species behavioral panel requested observational access during recreational period. The session was approved under controlled supervision. Marcus entered the yard without escort augmentation, moving with the same measured posture recorded in previous evaluations. Other detainees adjusted their spacing without command. There was no visible fear, only instinctive caution, the kind shown toward phenomena that cannot be predicted but have proven consistent. Marcus interacted when approached, spoke when addressed, and otherwise remained attentive without appearing vigilant. Analysts noted that his calmness did not lower tension. It defined its limits. During structured interaction exercises, he demonstrated a pattern that had become familiar to senior staff. When presented with a challenge, he did not confront it directly unless required. He reframed it. A strength contest became an efficiency problem. A strategic puzzle became a coordination task. Even verbal provocations lost structure when redirected. Observers concluded that his primary capability was not force application. It was outcome control through interpretation. He chose the frame in which events occurred, and within that frame he remained decisive. Facility Command initiated a dialogue session under formal oversight. The objective was clarification of boundaries, both institutional and personal. Marcus responded with precise language. He acknowledged authority where it was lawful. He questioned directives only when their purpose lacked definition. He did not seek exception. He sought consistency. When informed that regulations would remain in effect without alteration, he accepted without resistance. When asked what conditions produced conflict, he answered simply, unpredictability combined with coercion. Remove one, and stability followed. Each confrontation had originated not from aggression, but from forced action without explanation. When information was present, compliance followed. When intent was hidden, resistance emerged. The implication was operationally significant. Control of a human subject required transparency as much as restraint. The discovery unsettled security doctrine that relied on uncertainty as leverage. Engineering teams conducted a structural audit of his containment environment. No tampering was found, yet multiple micro-adjustments in object placement indicated continual environmental mapping. Marcus had not altered the room to escape. He had organized it to understand it. Knowing the system was itself a form of influence over it. Toward the end of the cycle, a minor disturbance occurred in an adjacent block. Standard response units mobilized. Marcus remained seated in his quarters, reading facility regulations displayed on a data interface. He did not request updates. He did not inquire about outcomes. Monitoring logs recorded no physiological stress indicators. Stability was not maintained through suppression. It appeared to be a practiced condition. The sixth cycle assessment concluded with revised operational guidance. Human subjects demonstrate capability independent of external tools. Containment must therefore prioritize clarity of procedure and proportional response. Confiscation removes instruments, not potential. Evaluation advanced from observation toward comprehension. Cycle 7 initiated under revised operating standards that treated predictability as a primary security measure rather than a convenience. Personnel briefings emphasized consistency of instruction, clarity of intent, and proportional response. The shift produced measurable effects. Interaction reports involving Marcus Halle showed reduced incident probability when communication preceded enforcement. Compliance was not compelled. It was secured through understanding. The facility had not grown weaker. It had grown more precise. Administrative review convened a closed evaluation regarding human classification doctrine. Comparative analysis between official threat rating and observed capability demonstrated systemic underestimation rooted in interpretive bias. Humans lacked overt biological weaponry, leading to procedural complacency. Yet every recorded engagement confirmed the same principle. Their primary asset was adaptive cognition integrated with physical resilience. They assessed variables in motion and acted before systems completed interpretation. This capacity rendered conventional threat scaling insufficient. Humans did not escalate linearly. They adapted discontinuously. During supervised recreation, Marcus was approached by a Tharan detainee unrelated to prior conflicts. The interaction was monitored as a potential stress test. The Thorn requested instruction in balance techniques observed during earlier altercations. Marcus complied without hesitation, demonstrating stance adjustment, weight transfer, and energy conservation. The exchange contained no dominance display. It resembled instruction rather than assertion. Observers noted a secondary effect. Nearby detainees reduced confrontational behaviors for the remainder of the period. Influence propagated through demonstration, not enforcement. Medical analytics continued longitudinal monitoring of recovery metrics from previous engagements. Marcus exhibited accelerated stabilization of cardiovascular and respiratory indicators following exertion. Stress response activation occurred rapidly but resolved with equal efficiency. The physiological profile suggested a system optimized, not for avoidance of conflict, but for rapid transition between states. This capacity explained earlier discrepancies between perceived effort and measured fatigue. He did not maintain tension. He entered and exited it deliberately. A procedural audit addressed the earlier extraction failure. Simulation modeling reconstructed the sequence in which 10 guards were neutralized within sub-minute duration. The analysis concluded that the outcome did not derive from superior strength, but from exploitation of momentum, structural leverage, and reaction latency. Each guard functioned according to training. The system failed because the system was predictable. Human engagement converted predictability into vulnerability. The finding prompted immediate revision of coordinated movement protocols. Command authorized a direct dialogue session to formalize long-term containment expectations. The conversation occurred within standard supervision parameters. Marcus affirmed willingness to comply with institutional rules provided they remained consistent and transparent. He articulated a principle that became central to policy revision. Force establishes control only temporarily. Legitimacy sustains it. The statement was entered into record not as philosophy, but as operational observation validated by data. Later in the cycle, a communications relay from Council Detention Authority confirmed procedural review of Marcus. Hale's case status. External pressure from multiple diplomatic bodies accelerated adjudication timelines. The facility was instructed to maintain current conditions without escalation. This directive aligned with internal assessments. Stability was not accidental. It was the result of calibrated interaction. Security feeds recorded Marcus in his quarters reviewing textual materials from the Earth Cultural Archive. Behavioral tagging identified patterns of reflective cognition rather than tactical analysis. He was not mapping exits. He was contextualizing events. The distinction proved significant. A subject who understands context requires fewer constraints than one who resists it. The 7-cycle report concluded with a consolidated determination. Humans do not require instruments to function as agents of force, yet they consistently prefer structure that makes force unnecessary. Their danger lies not solely in capacity for violence, but in capacity for restraint, governed by principle. When principle aligns with environment, conflict probability diminishes sharply. When it does not, escalation becomes efficient and decisive. Facility operations remain secure. Classification review advanced. Understanding, once provisional, approached confirmation. Cycle 8 began with procedural calm that no longer felt fragile. Adjusted protocols had transformed uncertainty into structure and structure into reliability. Guards communicated intent before action. Inmates responded with reduced hostility. Marcus Halle moved through scheduled routines without resistance, his conduct reinforcing a pattern the facility could now anticipate. The earlier tension had not vanished. It had been reorganized into something measurable. The Council transmitted formal notice of preliminary review results. Evidence logs from the diplomatic summit confirmed that Marcus's arrest stemmed from administrative pressure rather than demonstrable threat. Internal legal commentary described the detention as procedurally valid, yet substantively excessive. Within the facility, the announcement produced an observable shift in staff demeanor. The subject was no longer treated as a problem to contain, but as a responsibility to manage correctly. Supervised interaction periods revealed an unexpected development. Marcus had become a stabilizing influence within mixed species groups. Conflict frequency declined in zones where he was present. Behavioral analysis suggested that his composure altered escalation dynamics. He did not intervene forcefully. He introduced pause. That pause, brief but consistent, interrupted cycles of reaction that typically led to violence. The mechanism was subtle, but the data was clear. A controlled dialogue session was conducted to clarify post-detention expectations. Marcus expressed no intent to challenge council authority beyond lawful appeal. He stated that justice pursued through structure carried more weight than justice seized through force. The statement aligned with prior behavioral indicators. His restraint was not weakness, but preference. He had demonstrated capability repeatedly. He simply chose not to expand it beyond necessity. Facility Command compiled a comparative model, contrasting human behavioral response under three conditions: coercion, neutrality, and respect. Coercion produced resistance, followed by decisive counteraction. Neutrality produced compliance without engagement. Respect produced cooperation, accompanied by voluntary stabilization of surrounding variables. The conclusion was operationally significant. Humans did not merely respond to environment. They amplified it. Medical and cognitive monitoring continued without anomaly. Marcus maintained consistent physiological recovery rates and stable stress markers. No evidence suggested preparation for escape or retaliatory planning. Instead, observational logs recorded extended periods of reflection, reading, and limited physical conditioning within allowed parameters. He was not conserving energy for confrontation. He was conserving balance. As the cycle closed, Warden Crow finalized the updated classification directive for internal circulation. The designation emphasized duality: high adaptive threat potential, paired with high cooperative potential. Containment strategy would no longer assume opposition as default. It would assume response. The facility ended the cycle without incident. Systems functioned within predicted ranges. For the first time since Marcus Hale's arrival, stability did not feel temporary. It felt understood. Cycle 9 began quietly, almost deceptively so. The facility had adapted to the presence of Marcus Hale, and Marcus had adapted to the facility. Routine inspections, patrols, and meal distributions continued uninterrupted, but subtle shifts in behavior were noted among both staff and inmates. Conversation softened, displays of aggression diminished, and areas previously considered high risk began to operate smoothly. The warden observed these changes with growing respect, and a touch of unease. Marcus spent this cycle engaging with educational modules and cultural simulations designed for inmates. Rather than exploiting weaknesses, he participated attentively, even assisting others in understanding the materials. In the recreation yard, he mediated minor disputes without showing force, instead relying on reasoning and calm authority. Staff noted an unusual effect. Conflicts that would normally escalate to violent intervention were de-escalated almost automatically in his presence. It was as if his mere awareness altered the dynamics around him. The warden reviewed operational logs and biometric readings. Marcus's metrics remained well within safe parameters. Heart rate stable, muscular activity normal, stress hormones minimal. Yet, the logs reflected something else, a subtle, constant readiness. Marcus could have reacted lethally at any moment, but chose to remain measured. This was not passivity, it was control. And that control was disquieting. Council communications arrived confirming that the formal review had concluded. Marcus would serve the remainder of his administrative detention under revised humane conditions, and all procedural oversights would be corrected in his favor. The facility implemented these adjustments immediately, restored furniture, improved food variety, and clarified interaction protocols. Every staff member was briefed on the human's dual nature: cooperative, yet extremely capable. The final observation for the cycle was clear. Marcus Hale's presence had reshaped the facility. He did not fight for dominance, he fought for respect, and he earned it. The warden realized the profound lesson too late for pride. Humans were not weapons by design, yet every human carried the potential to be one. They were patient, adaptable, and remarkably effective at turning adversity into advantage. As the cycle closed, the warden sat back, contemplating the quiet revolution that had occurred in what had been considered a standard, predictable detention center.